Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and this is my iPhone XR. This was my main device for about a third to half of the year, depending on what I was doing. And this, I think, is a very underrated phone, and it sold incredibly well. But I wanted to show you how it's been for me, its durability. We'll talk about battery health and battery life, and the camera and a few other things. Now, the first thing is durability, and overall it's held up pretty well. I don't generally use a case, and of course, if I did use a case, I'd have less scratches and things like that. And there are a few scratches here and there, particularly on the front. So if I turn off the display, you may or may not be able to see them. It depends on the light that you're in, but there's a couple light scratches. There's no gouges or anything like that, but there is some scratching right in here. I don't know if you can see that, but there's some scratches right along the top here. And it's not a big deal. In normal light, you can't see it, especially if the display is on, and that's not a problem for me. Now, I want to talk about the display inside. And like I mentioned earlier, you can see the different scratches and things on the display a little bit easier in different lighting, but all of that could have been avoided if I would have just used a screen protector. But I did want to mention it because it has less scratches than my iPhone 11 Pro Max, and this is a year old. And when I'm not using it, sometimes it bumps up against other phones. Mostly it's in a bag in a case, but sometimes it does bump up against things, and it still has fewer scratches than the newer devices. So whatever the difference is in the glass or the coating on it, this one seems to hold up better, at least for me. I don't know about dropping it. I don't drop my phones, but so far it's held up really well. Now, it's easier to see this display, obviously, when you're not in bright sunlight, but that doesn't mean the display doesn't go bright. So if I turn it way up, it's nice and bright. You'll see you can't see it correctly on the camera, so I have to turn it back down to make all the lighting even here. But overall, it's a great display. And I know some people are going to say, how can you say it's a great display? It's below 1080p. And that's really not a relevant number. The relevant number is the actual pixel density. So to give you an example, if you have an OLED display needs to have higher pixel densities because of the pixel arrangement. If it didn't have those higher pixel densities, it just wouldn't look as sharp. So if you do a little bit of research on Google about that, you'll find that that's true. And in fact, LCDs, this one is very sharp. And if I didn't tell you this was an LCD, most people, and I mean 99% of people, could not tell the difference. I've seen tech YouTubers use this as their main phone. In fact, I used it as my main phone for quite a while. Viewing angles are great, and it's good enough that they're still using it in the iPhone 11. So it's really a good display. I have no complaints about it. The only thing you may not like is the bezel or the haptic touch, but haptic touch really isn't an issue anymore because the iPhone 11, 11 Pro, and Pro Max don't have it anymore. So you still have all of the same features. So it doesn't feel as lacking as maybe it was last year. And because you can scale content, you still have 1080p YouTube videos. You can go there, select that resolution, and it will scale appropriately. It's actually closer to 1080p than, say, 720p. It's just people get upset about the numbers, but it's really more about that pixel density. So I think overall this is a great display, and after a year, I have no problems with it still. The aluminum finish has held up incredibly well. There's no scuffing or anything like that, despite being laid on the table regularly and things. And the camera lens has held up well also. This is a hybrid sapphire, or I guess it's supposed to be sapphire, but is slightly less hard. So it's held up well also. I've had no issues. I don't normally drop my phones or anything like that. And in general, it's held up really, really well. Now, as far as the usability of it, well, it's fine to use. In fact, I would still buy one today if I was looking for a phone that was less expensive. The speed, the responsiveness, opening apps, scrolling, there's no issues whatsoever because this does not have an old processor in it, and this was much faster than the competition a year ago and still is today for the most part. The camera is still really, really good, and in general, this is one of the better cameras in most phones. In fact, I used this camera for video most of the year last year. Anytime you see the video being filmed outside, I was actually using the iPhone XR, and I found this to be the better phone for me to use outside because the lens arrangement is slightly different, and it actually has more consistent colors. There's less color shift when it's trying to look at a screen and other things as well. So as you're looking through this, the color doesn't shift depending on what's behind it as much, and it just works really well for video. Everything that I've used externally as far as microphones and things are working well with it, and it's just given me no issues whatsoever. Now, of course, I don't have the telephoto lens or the ability to take portraits of things other than, say, people, but in general, it was pretty good. Now, of course, a lot of you are going to want to know how battery life was. And so battery life easily got me through a day. In fact, this had the best battery life of last year until the iPhone 11 Pro and Pro Max came out. The battery life on this phone was the best. It easily got me through a day. And you'll see, because it was only used about a half a year, it has 100% battery health. However, I can say that phones in my house in general do pretty well. Heat is your number one enemy when it comes to battery health, and my wife's phone, which is an iPhone 10 that's 2 years old, has 91% battery health after 2 years, charging it every night and doing things like that. So if you'd like to see a video about that, let me know in the comments below, maybe a couple year later video, and whether or not you should buy one. But battery is fine on this. It easily lasts through a day, and actually call quality seems to be better in general and signal to, say, LTE. And I think that's because of the aluminum design. Maybe the stainless steel doesn't work as well when it's transmitting data and picking up for antennas. In theory, it should, but this one seems to do a little bit better as far as switching between Wi-Fi and LTE and just having consistent speed and no disconnect problems. So I find this to be the better phone in most cases, despite it being the lesser expensive model. So I think the XR is definitely something that you could still pick up and be happy with if you don't care about dual cameras or having the latest processor. But if you care very much about cameras, see my comparison. I'll leave a playlist below. I have a comparison between the 11 Pro, the 11 Pro Max, the 11, the XR, all of those I've done comparisons on. So if you want to know specifics, I'll link those playlists below. Now, while I don't typically use a case, for a while I did use this clear case from Apple. And I know a lot of people want to know how this holds up over a year because it's pretty expensive for a clear case. And you'll see it has very little yellowing. There's not much yellow on it at all, but it does have a couple little stress cracks, and I think that's from removing it so many times when making videos. So you'll see here's a little bit of a stress crack here, and it's not a big deal, but it's something to note, and they may replace this if you ask them to. And then down here, there's some stress cracking as well. It's not too much of a big deal, and I do think they put an oleophobic coating on here to reduce fingerprints, and it also hasn't seemed to scratch as easily as some other plastic cases I've seen. The buttons still work really well, and I definitely think it's one of the better cases. I still don't know if it's worth $40, but definitely $20 or so compared to some others I've seen that yellow probably within 6 months or so. So this is holding up really well, and it works well on the phone. And like I said, you don't normally remove it from your phone a lot, but because I have done that, it did put some stress here on the side. So you'll see it looks pretty good overall, and if you want to show off that color, there's probably not much of a better way to show it off. You'll see it did prevent some scuffing and scratching to the phone as well right here. But overall, the iPhone XR is a great phone. I highly recommend it and definitely think you should check it out if you're looking to upgrade from, say, an iPhone 6S, 6S Plus, 7, and one of those phones. If you'd like to get your hands on this wallpaper, of course, I'll link it in the description as I always do. And if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.